Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Ai Lin. Can you all hear me? Okay, I hope our audio and video is going out loud and clear to all our online participants and attendees. Welcome to Singapore Heritage Society's very first online event on food heritage at home. So once again, my name is Chua Ai Lin. I'm the Executive Director of the Singapore Heritage Society. It's really a pleasure to have so many of you here to join us for our event today. For those of you who are new to the Singapore Heritage Society, we are an independent voice for heritage conservation in Singapore, a citizens group founded in 1987. We're a registered society, we're a fully volunteer run, and we're concerned with different kinds of heritage, both built heritage as well as intangible heritage. Which brings me to how the topic for today's seminar came about. Can you all hear me? I'm having some messages here. Am I loud and clear now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so just to continue, in the Singapore Heritage Society, one of the types of heritage that we're really interested in is called intangible cultural heritage. And that's about the lifestyles, practices, traditions that also part of what we've inherited from the past. And this kind of intangible heritage, it's not just about something that was done in the past before and is no longer alive, but we're very interested in how this kind of intangible heritage can be sustained and transmitted. Which brings me to food and food heritage. So now during the COVID-19 situation, it's circuit breaker time in Singapore. There are lots of you from around the world who are also in lockdown, stay-at-home situation at home. And there are lots more people doing home cooking. And in the course of home cooking, many people are starting to try to recreate the kinds of foods that they grew up with, or cook the kinds of dishes that their mothers or grandmothers used to cook at home as well, or other family members. So we thought we'd like to talk about that in our online panel today. But one of the things I'd say is that today's event is not a cooking technique show. It's not about cooking per se, but we're here to try and understand more about food heritage and food history, specifically in the context of Singapore and Malaya. Also, more specifically, not just food, but food in our own homes, the foods that we've inherited and how they live on in our families. So for today, I'm really excited to have 4 gurus in this field with us. 2 of them will be live streaming to us from their own kitchens. And we'll also have Christopher, who will be joining us by audio only. So today's session will also have at the end a live cooking demonstration of korukate by Spicy Kitchen, and really special for today, we have a competition. One of you in our Zoom chat is going to be a random winner for the korukate dish that Spicy Kitchen is going to cook at the end of today's session. So, and we'll announce that at the end, and you'll have the food delivered straight to your home immediately. Okay, so for those of you who are registered and with us on Zoom, we're also going to take your questions and comments. Do put them in the Zoom chat and we'll look through them and also feed them on to our panel for discussion later on. Okay, so without further ado, let me quickly introduce our 4 groups of panelists for today. The first is Sarah Huang Benjamin. She's a cook, a food writer, and a television chef who hosts on the Asian Food Network and creates her own content on YouTube and social media. She studied sociology and politics in Edinburgh. She's also a cultural heritage researcher and documentary producer with a keen interest in heritage foods of Southeast Asia. So Sarah's our first panelist. Next, I'll move on to our second group. So it's not one person, but we have 2 here, a mother and daughter duo, Spicy. We have Mama Z. Hi, Mama Z.
Hi.
And we have Baby T, also known as Chahira. They host a home cooking experience in Singapore where they teach guests how to cook Indian Muslim food while sharing recipes, culture, and anecdotes of Indian Muslim lives in Singapore. And thirdly, we have Heer Johari. Heer is from Singapore Heritage Society. He was our former vice president, and he is a collector and independent researcher on history and culture of the Malay world. He's educated in mathematics from Stanford University, but he's also a cultural enthusiast and knows a lot about food and food heritage. He regularly writes lectures and contributes on this topic for Friends of the Museum and curates the annual Flavors of Kampong Glam food experience. So Kier will be having a book being released later this year called The Food of Singapore Malays, Gastronomic Travels Through the Archipelago. So thank you, Kier. And last but not least, we have Christopher Tan.
Aloha.
So Christopher, unfortunately, will be joining us by audio today. Many of you are already familiar with Christopher and his work because he's an award-winning writer, a cooking instructor, and photographer. He's been a commentator on and a chronicler of food, culture, and heritage for publications such as Singapore's Straits Times and The Peak and America's Saveur magazine. He's also authored and co-authored a number of cookbooks, most recently Nerd Baker, a memoir come baking book, and his most recent book is The Way of Kueh, a compendium of Singapore's traditional kueh heritage. So there you've met our 4 groups of panelists, and I'm sure you've heard me talk way more than you want to right now. And without further ado, let me tell you a bit more about the format for today before we let the panelists take the floor. Okay, so we're going to start out with having each of the groups of panelists to talk to us for a few minutes, introduce to you what they do with food, their relationship with food, and answer the question, what does food heritage mean to them? And more specifically, food heritage at home, and why is it important to each of them? So we'll go in the order of Sarah first, and then Spicy Kitchen here, and then Christopher. So over to Sarah, who is in her kitchen. So besides introducing herself to us, you're also going to tell us a bit about what you'll be cooking in the kitchen whilst you're talking to us, right? So go ahead, Sarah, over to you.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah. What I'm cooking today is actually something I resisted choosing for today's demo. So my background is that I am a cook. I cook on TV, I make food content, but I'm also involved in cultural heritage research and documentary making. So I have kind of 2 separate interests, parallel interests in food heritage. One is the collective food heritage of Singapore or of the communities in Singapore, but also on an individual level, I just really like to cook and I really like to eat. And so that is my relationship with food heritage specifically. Today, the recipe that I chose is Hakka abacus seeds. So my family background is quite mixed. My father is British, although he came a long time ago, so almost Singaporean. And my mother is Hokkien, Hakka, Peranakan. So this dish is probably the only real heritage dish that's been passed down in my family. Unlike the other panelists, I think my mom is actually one of the attendees on this call. No offense to my mom, but I did not learn cooking from my mom. Unlike a lot of the other panelists, and I'm sure a lot of people, my grandmother and my mother have never really been home cooks. So my knowledge of cooking heritage dishes is sort of a reconstruction. It's based on hearing the stories and eating the dishes and then going out and doing my own research from cookbooks or various sources. So this dish is a very fraught one for me because this is a dish that we have had at every Chinese New Year since as long as I can remember. And so everyone has a very strong opinion on it. So I resisted choosing it, but in the end, I thought it was the only real dish that I could demonstrate for today. So I am going to kind of attempt to cook as well as talk. And the reason I really wanted to choose this dish is because for me, food heritage is, it comes on 2 levels. There is the collective food heritage that we kind of accept as Singaporean food heritage, or Chinese food heritage, Malay food heritage, Indian food heritage, you know, the CMIO model. But beyond that, I think food heritage for individuals on a personal level involves reaching back into your family's collective memory and relating to generations that have passed before you. So it can become difficult because I think there is a gap between what we consider the held food heritage of a community or a group and our individual food heritage. So for me, this dish really exemplifies that. It's a traditional Hakka dish, and I cook it every Chinese New Year. And every Chinese New Year, I am subjected to the harsh critiques of my family. And this year's Chinese New Year, I was told that this dish didn't taste the same as what my great-grandmother made because I didn't use the exact brand of fish sauce that comes from China, which is, an impossible standard to live up to, really. And I think for me, the point that I really want to make with this dish is that food heritage cannot just look backwards. It also has to look forward. And I've modified it. Probably my grandmother would be aghast at what I've done, but this dish is traditionally a pork dish. But for me, my father doesn't really eat pork either. So I find that clinging on to certain ideals excludes people from eating and excludes people from cooking. So I've replaced the pork and pork fat with chicken and chicken fat. My father actually has Jewish heritage, so I've borrowed the Jewish technique of rendering schmaltz, which is chicken fat, to cook the abacus. And it may not line up with what most Hakkas consider heritage abacus, but I think that food needs to be inclusive. So, for example, if I wanted to share this with Tahira and her mom, at least I can share my version. And I feel very strongly that clinging too much to an ideal of authenticity is, in the end, it's quite detrimental to the handing down of food heritage. Of course, we have to be very aware of the history, and you have to make choices when you're making modifications that reflect the history of that dish or of that cuisine. But food is ever changing, and so that's what I'm doing today. Yep.
Thank you very much, Shara. That's really interesting how you're combining your own different sides of your heritage together in your own version of Hakka abacus seeds. Okay, so next we will meet Spicy Kitchen, Mama Z and Baby Tahira.
Hello. Hi there.
So just to say that you will be doing your cooking demonstration at the end of today's session. So at about 4:15, we will focus on you, and you'll spend 10 minutes to show us how to cook that dish, right? So but for now, we'll just have a conversation with you talking about food heritage. Okay, please go ahead.
So my mom actually agreed with what Sarah said at the end. So let's start off from there, which is that she feels food has to be inclusive and to serve as many people as possible. And drawing on from Sarah's comments, I think it's very funny because as Indian Muslims who eat so much meat in our food, like mutton, chicken, beef, goat, like a lot, lamb sometimes, now we have a vegan cousin who's my mom's sister's daughter, who basically eats none of that. So my mom feels devastated about this every Hari Raya, and she has tweaked like our mee siam recipes, our pal mee siam recipes to also be applicable and
So that she can eat it.
so that she can eat it as well. So I think for us, or what I've learned from my mother is that food should be something that brings people together. And at the end of the day, it can take lessons from your parents or your grandparents, but it should be worked around the people who are at the table. Yeah. What about our sessions? Well, in brief, we've started Spicy Kitchen about going to be a year now. And to be very honest, I've lived with my mom for like 28 years now, but this 1 year, I have learned from her more dishes than I have in the past 27 years. And that's because we've spent more time in the kitchen together. And she's also a very patient and non-judgmental teacher who doesn't make mistakes of my onion cutting or my garlic cutting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I've also, while doing these sessions, I've also found a niche. I feel niche. I feel happy in sharing these recipes which were long forgotten. Now I'm taking it out of my cupboard, so to speak, and sharing with a lot of people. And going from a line from Sarah, I think it should be inclusive. It should bring people together. Holding on to something which is of the past is not going to help to bring the food forward, and it might just die if nobody uses it or nobody shares or eats it.
I think also for us, we hold these sessions not necessarily for people who are from our culture. So precisely because they are from outside our community, they are learning it from the first time, and they might need to make adjustments or to do it in a way that they can make it in their own kitchen. So the reason we do it is to share our culture and to open the eyes of the people we're bringing home to just the different foods in our homes, our communities, and to show them how we eat with our hands, what we eat, and just learn about us, I guess.
It was an accidental journey?
Yeah, I would say we started it out of an accident, but it has become more meaningful for us.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. And I hear the positive comments from a lot of people. I feel very happy that it's actually helping people, actually introducing the young people or pushing the young people into the cooking arena. Yeah, people are taking up the spoon and the ladle to start cooking. And it's not such a scary thought.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Mama Z and Tahira, and we'll come back to you later with some questions to ask you a little bit more about your experience in teaching people. Next, let's move on to Here. Here, would you like to tell us about your journey with food and why it's so important to you? Why is food heritage so important to you?
Hi, everybody. I'm not preparing any dishes like Sarah, Mama Z, and Tahira, but I'll do a little storytelling. I grew up in Kampung Glam, a historic district with an urban cosmopolitan setting. So that's my main reference point, where I received my first education of taste. The household where I grew up was a bit of an anomaly. It was a 4-generation family with a great-grandmother as a matriarch and 4 kitchens. And the last I counted, there were 46 people under one roof. So we saw the constant flow of visitors, and there were regular observances and celebrations, being a big family. And Bustra Street, where Margaret Sullivan, wrote in her book "Can Survive La" about Singapore cottage industry in high-rise Singapore, as an important center of kueh production creation center, was just a stone throw away from my home. At the same time, Mom conducted cooking classes from early 70s from home. As a kid, I was a very busybody kid. Yeah, I saw friends, boys and girls, hawking food in baskets and trays on their head in the neighborhood. I enjoyed going to the Clyde Street Market. That was the before we had the Pasir Panjang wholesale market, to buy pates or hay cork, by the kati. It's not even kilo. And I also had this daily encounter with the Nyonya Kicap, the elderly lady who sold Chinese soy sauce, on a wooden push cart, and also the bread man on his bicycle. I had many conversations with family elders on why do we eat what we eat, and why is a particular food that we experience is nice or not nice. So perhaps that led to my interest in the subject of food ethnology. How does one learn or tell about a community of people through food? And Malay food ethnology is close to my heart, and I feel that it's under-researched, under-recognized. So in my forthcoming book, The Food of Singapore Malays, I will be touching on, among other things, the genealogy of food, and also food as intangible cultural heritage. So what does food heritage mean to me? Well, food heritage means so many different things to me. Smell, colors, taste evoke so many memories, helping me hold in my mind the vividness of the past. So food heritage is smell of curry spices being sauteed on Kandahar Street. Accompanying the smells are the sounds, Tamil, Malayali, Hindi, hawkers from different parts of the subcontinent. Food heritage is about the jobs that was assigned to me by my mother, aunties, and grandmothers. I remember being tasked to chop off the sheets of banana leaves so that mom could wrap her kueh. I remember being asked to guard grandma's colorful agar-agar as it is being dried in the sun, and then given the first delicious, crunchy bite. And I remember, of course, playing masak-masak with the chapati dough, which I got, from the hawker right behind, my kitchen wall. So, you keep needing to play the dough until the dough changes color and it turns dark. Or playing hide and seek, behind a tauge production, bathtub. Yeah, they had this huge bathtub with tauge kind of productions. So we were hiding behind the bathtub. So, yeah, and also was quite fortunate growing up, practically next door to Rumah Jawa on number 51 Sultan Gate. So that was the nerve center, producing satay and mee rebus to be sold throughout our island. All this and so much more is food heritage to me. The mind remembers not just words and objects, but smells, tastes, sights, and the drama of events centered around making food. And as we remember these, we remember entire ways of lives. So to the question, Sarah talked a little bit about kind of heritage and the present. Yes, I totally agree that food heritage exists in the present. The present is the past is the present, and the present, the present, the past. So what you cook today, draws on the strengths of the past. The past and present, it's inseparable. So why is food heritage important to me? I think it's important because it's about affirming who you are and what your way of life is.
Okay.
I'm not sure I want to proceed, yes.
Thank you very much for sharing here. Thank you for also giving all the background of your memories in Kampung Glam. That's adding a whole historical dimension to what we're talking about as well. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move on now to Christopher. Christopher, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Sorry, I was just wrapped listening to everyone. I almost forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm taking notes as well. Okay, so Christopher, please, over to you.
Okay, so sorry everyone, my camera is a bit iffy, so you're only seeing my photo and not me live, but you probably don't want to see my face after 2 weeks of lockdown anyway. For me, what does food mean to me? I'm a Peranakan. I grew up in a food-obsessed culture and a food-obsessed family, so it's in my blood, it's in my bones. Why is food heritage important to me? As everyone has already said so eloquently, food is the soul of a community. Food heritage is something that can only be born of a community. But the beautiful thing about it is that it exists at a personal level, at a family level, at a community level, and at a national level. There's so many layers to it, and I've always felt that food is the first and the best way to get to know any culture. It's the gateway to understanding and appreciating any culture for what it is. You want to get to know me, you come and eat at my table. Come and watch me in the kitchen. Come and see what flavors are important to me. And so I think food heritage is very, is the soul and it's the core of every culture, I think. But I also want to say that sometimes we have the idea that heritage is something that is written in a manual somewhere, or kept in a cupboard or put on a shelf in a museum somewhere. And heritage is not something that we have to wait for the Heritage Board to do for us or to collect or record for us. To me, heritage is something that's living, okay? What distinguishes, what makes a culture alive and vibrant and exciting is the fact that it's changing. It's always evolving. It's always encountering new things. It's always adapting to new situations and circumstances. It's always absorbing new things and transforming them according to its own history. So heritage is dynamic. And heritage is something that each of us has a role to play in. Just by waking up in the morning and making what our family normally has for breakfast, you are doing heritage, you are making culture. And every single person, not just academics, not just museum curators, not just celebrities, not just chefs, everyone is a participant and a maker of culture. So, you know, the simple act of cooking dinner for your family is you are taking a stand for heritage, for your heritage and for your culture. So that's very important. My qualifications, I actually have a degree in psychology. And a lot of people ask me, also, what got you into food? And I always say that, you know, food is the cheapest, most widely available, and often most effective kind of therapy for anything in life. You know, can't be the big cup of kopi and a piece of kaya toast if you're feeling blah. And, you know, that's just a joke, but I am also deadly serious about the fact that food is something that really speaks to the heart of everyone, and food can pep you up, you know, especially all of us now stuck at home, finding things to do. I think cooking, certainly talking to all my friends and colleagues, cooking is on the upswing for a lot of people. A lot of people are finding they have time to cook and to do things that they haven't cooked for a long time. And, you know, I think that's wonderful, and I hope to see more of that.
Thank you very much for sharing, Christopher. And thank you for also the call to action for all our attendees and our viewers today, that everybody has a role to play in keeping heritage going. I think that's something that came up in what all the speakers talked about, and it's that question of how you've been adapting recipes, how the heritage is dynamic and always changing. So I thought, how do you kind of understand what it is that's still that core that makes it what it is? So for example, Sarah, when you change your Hakka abacus recipe, at what point might it no longer become Hakka abacus seeds and become something else? And how do you still recognize it as Hakka abacus seeds?
Well, I guess because it is a spotlight on the abacus seeds, which look like this, by the way. So
Yay!
This is matched with tapioca starch and rice flour, and it's a painstaking process of rolling them out into little balls that look like the abacus seeds when you calculate. So I guess this is really the kind of the star of the dish, but you know, somehow this dish has kind of come back into vogue, and I've even eaten it outside with a dash of truffle oil, which, to be honest, I don't feel very good about. To me, yes, replacing pork with chicken, though my grandmother wouldn't approve, chicken is still an ingredient that's used in Hakka cooking, and it's recognizable as coming from the parts of China that, you know, Hakkas come from. To start throwing, I think, if you were to put Italian porcini mushrooms instead, or truffle oil, I don't think it's, you know, it's not wrong. It's experimentation, but I think that when we're talking about making modifications, it needs to be informed by your own individual heritage as well. So for me, using chicken fat, so as I said, my father has Jewish heritage, so I've made matzah ball, which is a Jewish dish. And for that, you render your own schmaltz. You make gribbeens, which is Yiddish for crispy chicken skin. And to me, in this person, me, I felt that it made sense to bring those two aspects of the culture's cuisines together. So it can't be a thoughtless inclusion of, you know, foie gras. Why? I think there has to, the why question of why you've made that modification needs to be answered.
Okay, thank you very much. What about the rest of you? Any of you have thoughts on this question, or maybe you have an example from your own cooking where you've made modifications? How do you keep it recognizable as the original dish? Anybody want to jump in here?
I completely agree with Sarah. I always think that you know, innovation and experimentation are necessary for any cuisine and culture to thrive. But it is what makes an innovation persist and what makes it popular is the fact that it's grounded. You know, I interviewed Bangkok Kyong, the chef, who is also Hakka, for my recent book. And he said something which I also stand behind, which is, where are you going to go if you don't know where you're coming from? And the same thing applies when you want to change or to, you know, experiment with a dish. The intent and the anchor of that modification or that change should be clear, should be comprehensible. You know, it's very interesting. I just want to say that I was reading an archived interview with Mrs. Leong Yi-Su, our famous local chef who wrote, you know, 2 volumes of Singaporean cooking. And I found this archive interview with her from the 1980s. And it described her as someone who is always experimenting, and she owns every new gadget in town. And it quoted her as saying, "I love experimenting with everything that's new in the market, and I refuse to believe that only the old way is best." And this is Mrs. Leong Yi-Su, who is one of our paragons of local heritage cookbook writing. Okay. And another quote from her from the article, she said, "Imagination, creativity, common sense, and daring are the characteristics of a good cook." And I wholeheartedly agree. And Sarah, I want to eat those.
Okay, I'll send you some.
I think my mom wanted to add
Sarah. Go ahead, please go ahead, Tahira.
I was whispering in her ear the question for her to think about. And mommy, go ahead. In regards to preserving food culture, the technique of making the food is what my mom feels is what keeps the food original to the dish itself. So for an example, if somebody wanted to take our mee siam biryani recipe and put kueh tia with it, or I don't know, some other noodle that they want to experiment with.
Or maybe brown rice.
Or brown rice or something. I mean, of course, the taste is going to differ vastly, but if they follow the technique of layering the carb choice with the curry and then continually to the top and then cooking it dum style, Mama Z thinks that that would be sticking to the culture or the way in which it has been passed down. But of course, the irony, I guess, is also that we have moved away from the origin of how it was made, right? Because people in the past used charcoal and they did it in like the veranda or somewhere in a more open space, whereas we use a stove now. And we do a more modern day version of it. But this is because of like the technical difficulties that come with living in a high-rise apartment. So I guess some changes that we make to the recipe have more to do with our living styles rather than a choice we make to not follow it. Because on Hari Raya, like my mom, not this Hari Raya, the last one, my mom did go to her sister's house to make food on charcoal because they made a huge quantity. So wherever possible, if we can keep the origins to the style of cooking and the techniques, and we do, it would be great. But if you have to adapt it because of your whatever issues, maybe you are living in a tiny kitchen or you don't have the resources, then you just have to do what you have to do lah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I want to add something. Well, yes, we recognize that, food heritage is not something static. We try to adapt, with the passage of time, new ingredients, new tools. But I think it ought to be a thoughtful process because it's very convenient, to shave, I don't know, you have to have nasi lemak and you shave some truffle on it, some sliced salami. But it has to be, you have to begin by perhaps understanding, the flavor profile and see whether it works to make modification. One success story that I want to share here is at number 35 Busra Street. We all know kueh putri salad, where we have the two layers. The top layer is made of the pandan custard, and the bottom with glutinous rice. Now we recognize that glutinous rice has got high glycemic index, so it's kind of heavy. So what do you do if you want something similar? So the introduction of bird's custard, with the British, in this part of the world, in Singapore and Malaya, and we were introduced with bird's custard because Mr. Bird, created his custard for his wife who had this egg allergy. So it's actually an eggless custard. So the lady of number 35 took the top of the street, the kueh putri salad, and instead of having the bottom glutinous rice, she switched that with bird's custard instead. and have it speckled with both cream and also kernel corns. And then you get, tada, kuih talam jagung.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you very much, Chia. Thank you for sharing that example of innovation. Okay, so let me move on to something a question that actually come up from one of our attendees in the seminar. So it's all very well to say, yes, we can innovate recipes to suit our method of our lifestyle these days, or the ingredients that are available. But how do we know what do we refer back to? Christopher, you talked about that anchor. So some of our audience today are wondering, but how do we get a good knowledge of those origins of the anchor of the original dish before we start to innovate and change and experiment? Anybody want to try that question?
Actually, I was going to talk about something very similar to this, Eileen, as I think about like us being immigrants to Singapore, right? So if I moved out of Singapore to another country, and if I have children and my children are unable to speak to my mother very regularly, their idea and access to Indian Muslim food, or Indian food for that matter, and their anchor would be very different, because they may not be able to see the array and diversity of spices that you can get in Singapore. So I think that the locality of being rooted to these spices, or the availability of these spices, helps us to make adjustments, yes, but also to inform the food in a certain way. So if we were to move away from a place that does not have these ingredients, then I would say it's harder to continue it, because you would have to find replacements. This is my opinion. Yeah.
I'll just jump in and say that I totally know what you mean, because I lived in the UK for 5 years, and that was actually when I started cooking Singaporean food. While I was living in Singapore, I never needed to, because I could buy it. And it was the absence of the availability that made me want to learn. But I think even more than ingredients, if we're talking about anchors, I think it's almost a memory. So you can replace ingredients, but I guess the final taste, or there has to be an essence in the dish that reminds you of why that is a heritage dish to you. Does it taste like what your mother made, even though you're using slightly different ingredients? And I think that this is something that Singaporeans especially need to kind of chill out about, because we're very keen on authenticity. Oh, this laksa is not the same as what I ate in the old days, Rausi laksa. Oh, so don't want to eat. I mean, why? Does it mean we shouldn't cook if you cannot pound your own sambal? So don't cook at all? Or, so I think the anchors need to be in the taste, or in the way they invoke the dish invokes memories for you personally, rather than, certain, you must use tumbuk to pound your spices, or you must use the dried shrimp from Tanjung Pinang, or, stuff like that.
I'll jump in. Totally agree with Sarah. I want to say that in an ideal world, right? You grow up in your family home, you taste your family's cooking, your parents and your seniors explain it to you and communicate your own heritage to you, and you become acquainted with the flavors of your community, your personal family, your ethnic heritage. Okay. When I interview people for my most recent book, a lot of seniors said to me that they feel it's very important to consciously teach the appreciation of heritage flavors to your kids starting from when they're young, so that they will know it as they grow up. Or else, if they grow up eating a lot of fast food or junk food, and instead of consciously paying attention to what their family's cuisine heritage is, they may not develop an appreciation for it. So in terms of being familiar with one's heritage, ideally, we would have that from our childhood. And I know not everyone has the privilege of growing up in a very foodie family, or a family that cooks at home. But if as an adult, you want to reconnect yourself to that, there are plenty of books in the library. There are plenty of online resources for you to find out more about your own heritage. And also just a word about authenticity. authenticity is not like some platonic ideal set in stone, you know, on a tablet handed down to Moses kind of thing. It's not like you are born and then you're handed a manual and say, here, this is your Peranakan guidebook. You must live according to this, right? A dish and a food can only be authentic to a person or a time or an era or a place, because no dish is without attributes like time and space and a creator, you know? So what is authentic laksa to me now may be entirely different to what was authentic laksa to my grandma in her time, because ingredients have changed. You know, agriculture has changed. You go down to shop today and ask for 5 cents belacan, see what you get. You know, so everything has changed. So it is the responsibility of every cook and every consumer to understand what heritage it is that their family has and what they were gifted with at birth, okay? And then has to find a way to make that heritage relevant to themselves and to find a way to actively stand in that heritage, live that heritage, and then pass on that heritage.
I want to just jump in on that, right? Because I think it's so funny now that I think about it. When I was younger, I remember my mom making me eat a lot of food that I really dislike, like hirasade, you know. It's a kind of like a spinach soup. Oh, I really didn't like it, man. I never liked spinach growing up. So I really didn't like it. It's like, and also another very like poor man food is like lentils cooked with tamarind sauce. It's very typical food, but I never really liked it. And I feel like I always favored like fast food and all the very attractive, cool food outside over the stuff that was created at home. But my parents obviously forced me, no nonsense about it, no delivery and all that. And we ate it anyway. And as I grew older, I realized that there was a lot of, I think there's nutrients in there. Like, I can't deny it. Like, there was a lot of good that came out of them force feeding me those kind of dishes. So even if your children prefer like the more trendy food like fried chicken wings or McDonald's, as people are commenting now in the chat section, I think it's important to show them what is really created from scratch from home that's nutritious, and to remind them of what in these dishes, which I learned much later in my life, is good for your health, especially that spinach dish.
Tahira, I'm pumping my fist now. You can't see me, but I'm pumping my fist.
The black pulut also.
Which one?
The black pulut. Yeah,
black pulut?
Yeah, the black
pulut. You
pulut.
forced me to eat that too.
That's when
a lot of foods were force-fed, to be honest. I don't feel like I had a choice as a kid. Like when you reach puberty, you are made to eat like the flour that makes black glutinous rice. You grind them and then you mix it with hot water and some black sugar, and then feed the child, because the black glutinous rice has lots of iron content. It actually replenishes the body. And raw egg every day for 14 days.
Yeah.
My God, with gingerly oil in the eggshell.
Yeah, all this we don't see it at that moment, but when you're much older, it comes back to help you. Yeah.
So there is definitely heritage in that, and even though your child or younger people may not like it and may choose to push it away, one way is of course to force feed them, but another way is to educate them as to the relevance or the importance of it as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I think we have a situation here where Tahira, you've been really lucky to grow up with Mama Z, who force-fed you these things. But we also have some people who may not have had that privileged kind of like rich food experience at home before. And now as adults, I'm thinking, you know, I'd really like to learn. I'd really like to taste experience those traditional tastes, and I want to learn. That's why they might go for the spicy kitchen experience to learn from you. They didn't have it growing up, but now they want to learn. I don't know, do any of you have any suggestions for people who are in that situation now?
I have a point that is not exactly relevant, but it's something that I remember that I wanted to talk about, is that I think we must also not ignore, especially in today's context in Singapore, the role of domestic help in passing down food heritage. So with the dish that I'm making, the abaca seeds, my childhood memory of making this is with my grand aunt, who's a Hakka woman who had the knowledge, but it was me, her, and my Filipina nanny, who I call Tete, who would sit around the table and roll the abaca seeds. And, you know, in a way, these helpers, they're the ones who actually help to pass down these recipes. And especially in Singapore, I think if younger people want to learn their grandmother's recipes and their grandmother has domestic help at home, then I think it's very important to go and ask the helpers what they've helped their grandparents cook, because often that's actually an unseen path of transmission of knowledge.
Here, would you have anything to share about people who want to learn? And
I think you just need to just jump in, you know, roll your sleeve and, you know, start, I don't know, by going to the market, by, you know, observing what people are working on, you know, ask questions, start, you know, sort of, you know, cultivating a taste for certain food. You know, while we are talking, well, we have spoken quite a bit about, you know, how we make sort of adjustment, we've adapted to the times with ingredients and technique. But also there's also another component of heritage that I feel that we also has a role, or we have also want to play that part of preserving as much as we could. Because if not, then with time, then, you know, we would lose that tacit knowledge, the intimate knowledge of, you know, what is, if we say something is lemak, what is lemak? How lemak is lemak? You know, what is our reference point? So I think, yeah, there's also that component that I think we need to talk about is, you know, should we also preserve as much as we could?
anybody want to respond to that?
I think we should preserve as much as we can across the board, you know, at all times. We live in an era where ways of recording information and storing information are much more efficient than ever before. You know, I could put a whole encyclopedia on my phone. It is so easy to record data and info now. And the thing with a lot of traditional cooking is that it's the little grace notes, as Kia was just saying, what is lemak, you know? Little things in the technique of making something or cooking something or pounding something. And these are sometimes difficult to put down in words. And that's the challenge facing every heritage cookbook author. You know, we have to find a way to translate all these little intangible things. You know, Ai Lin mentioned intangible cultural history. We have to find a way to put these down in a form that can be understood by everyone. You know, it's difficult, but it's possible, and we should absolutely do that. You know, like I said earlier, food heritage is a product of community, and so the heritage of a cuisine, of a culture, is the sum total of what everyone makes. Everyone has a part to play. Everyone's version of buah keluak matters in the end when we're thinking about how you cook buah keluak. You know, it's not like there is one platonic version which everyone must stick to or be excommunicated. Everyone's own individual family variation matters.
Yeah, it's you know, imagine a mother with 3 daughters. You know, she has one recipe, but ultimately, you know, the resultant of the, you know, after the one recipe passed to 3 daughters, and I think the final result of every dish, I mean, from each daughter is good. There's going to be variation even within one family. Yeah, it's expected, I think.
I like what you said, Christopher, because there is always that tussle between the community food heritage and your own individual family food heritage. I think Sarah's a really great example of how she's got a very particular and specific individual family history, and that feeds into her version of her own food heritage. Actually, we're on the subject of learning and how people learn. I think this is where I'd really like to hear from Mama Z and Tahira about your experiences in teaching people. Because how do you Mama Z, did you have to think about how you want to explain the techniques to people who may not even be from your own culture? What did thought process or did you have to go through to figure out how to teach other people?
The first session was my first learning curve because they couldn't understand what I was trying to say. So from then on, I had to simplify it, maybe make some adjustments, and tweaking the style a bit to suit that the newcomer.
I think we categorized the people who came into two groups. The people who had no experience cooking at all, we usually did very simple recipes with them, like making breads like chapati or roti jala or torse sometimes. And people who had some experience with cooking, then we did like the more complex dishes like parmesan and biryani, or like even sambal goreng and stuff like that. Yeah. I think one interesting learning from my mother and I was to say the ingredients or certain techniques which we had just learned automatically in Tamil into English, which we never really thought of before, but had to learn to translate into English during these sessions. And sometimes more than the spoken word, what we realized through our sessions was they would watch us. For those who are very intuitive cooks, they would watch and then they would just be like, okay, we got this. And then they do it by themselves. Those are the more daring and like gung-ho kind of guests. But of course there were also many. It's very funny for us to recount this because there are really so many different kinds of guests we get. Some people are so scared to even just turn the spoon because they think they will mess up something, like
the oil will splatter.
Or the oil will splatter, or like maybe if they do something wrong, then the thing will be messed up. Like maybe because they don't have that kind of they're just not so intuitive about cooking. So the experience, because my mom will be like, just cook lah, doesn't matter. I mean, you're going to eat it at the end of the day. So they learn to loosen up a bit and then they manage the experience.
Yeah. So basically they had to be given the ownership to do that cooking. At the end of it, the dish comes out slightly different from what I actually cook, but it's still it's nice. They enjoy doing it. So I think I get a lot of pleasure seeing that happiness in their face and when they say, wow, I did this.
Yeah.
So when preparing for the workshops, did you have to measure ingredients or did you have to write things down, do things that you wouldn't normally have done?
We don't, actually during our sessions, we don't give them like exact measurements because that's not even how my mom cooks with to begin with. She's the aga-aga chef, so she doesn't have that. But we do, like at the start of the experience when we are in the dining hall or the living room, we will put the ingredients on the table and explain which ingredients go into which dish. And before we start the cooking itself, my mother will show like the first 4 steps and then they do it. And then after that, the next 4 steps and then they'll do it.
Hand holding, yeah?
I would say if they are a bit like afraid, there's a lot of hand holding. But if they are gung-ho, then you just go ahead with their spirit in the kitchen.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing here is sometimes we think, well, we want a recipe, we want to learn from some kind of book or something. But as Christopher said, it's so hard to put in words. Like Mama Z, you have to show them how to do it step by step. And I think maybe at one time in the past, the only way we could learn about how to cook from external source would be by books. And that has a certain limitation. But as Christopher said, nowadays there's so many ways to record and document what we do. So Sarah, you have your own YouTube channel. You make videos about cooking. And I was just thinking about that change we have in the way that we deliberately try and learn how to cook. So in the past, you would have learned from your elders in your family, like here, you would have seen it with your own eyes, smelled, you talked about the smells and the taste, a lot of real hands-on, and which can't be captured in writing. But maybe now with video and all that, we're getting a little bit closer to that more tactile experience, I think, but not entirely, of course. I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that, of how times have changed in terms of the way we learn and the way we cook.
Ai Lin, I think Sarah needs to show us a part of a dish, otherwise she won't have time to complete it. Can we go to Sarah?
Sarah, let's have a look at the food.
Yeah, so, okay, I haven't been working that hard, but I've only produced this number of advocacies. It takes a very long time, which is another barrier to cooking dishes like this, heritage dishes like this. But like a 1990s cooking show, I prepared some earlier. I made these last night. And these are just boiled. And then what happens is they get fried with a number of ingredients. So this is my rendered chicken. Oh, here we go. This is my, this is my rendered chicken fat. And then this is the assortment of traditional accompaniments: dried squid, dried shrimp, black fungus, and dried mushrooms. But, you know, again, when we were talking about anchor ingredients earlier, I think, you know, it's easy to say, oh, it's not the same without dried shrimp, it's not the same without dried squid. But for me, to be honest, what makes abacus seeds one of my favorite dishes is the beads. So as long as you kind of replicate a dish that is meaningful to you, if you create the aspects of the dish that you personally as an individual like, I think that is how you can feel motivated to keep making it. So I think it's very important that you also cook what you like. Yes, so now I'm going to go and fry the abacus seeds.
Okay, thank you. So Sarah, do you eat other people's abacus seeds as well? And what do you think of them? Whether you eat something that's not from cooked by your own family, how does the taste feel to you?
We periodically, I mean really periodically, like once every 5 years, we will go and try a Hakka restaurant with my grandmother and my mother. And not once has the verdict been positive. So I think, you know, that is basically what I'm going up against when I cook this. But so this recipe is my own. It's not my grandmother's, it's not anyone's. I came to this ratio of yam to tapioca starch on my own through working backwards from a written recipe. So I found a recipe in a cookbook, and I made it. And then based on the feedback that I got, I kind of fixed the ratios to the point that it's satisfactory to my family, because what they think the texture should be is not what another Hakka family will think the texture should be, which is why I also think what Spicy Kitchen is doing is really good, because I just want to say it's so good that they're teaching people how to cook, because so many times, I don't know if other people have this experience, you cook for your family, your elders, and they say, yeah, not the same, not the same. Then you ask them how to cook, don't know. So, I mean, they can't really show you, or they can't really tell you, because maybe they've never actually cooked it themselves, even though the memory means so much to them. So I think Spicy Kitchen is doing really amazing work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying. People who may not have had that own rich culinary experience at home, now they can go to Spicy Kitchen and learn from Mama Z. So, you know, it's a really very valuable experience that you're creating for a lot of people. And now I just want to ask the panelists, do you have any questions or comments for each other?
I would like to ask Tahira and Mama Z, actually, if you could just explain to us what Indian Muslim food is, because I think a lot of us, you know, associate Indian Muslim with prata and Indian rojak and maybe a couple of other dishes. But, you know, of course, the heritage is much more complex and varied than that. So can you tell us what your own heritage is and how that fits in with in the broader context of what is Indian Muslim food?
So Indian Muslim food is basically food that we eat in our homes. That's why we call it Indian Muslim food. And it's basically a combination of Indian food that we have made over time to fit our religious festivals, celebrations, and daily meals at home. So one thing for a fact that Muslims do in general is sacrifice meat for one Hari Raya celebration. And we sacrifice Hari Raya Hajj. So we sacrifice either goat or whatever meat that's available in your land. And based on that celebration, we have from then on incorporated a lot of like goat, like meats into our sometimes vegetarian Indian dishes like sambar. And so by adding the meat stock and the bone into it, it has become dalcha, which is what we eat with a lot of things, idiyappam, thosai, like any bread in general. That's one. And the second thing I would say is Indian Muslim food maybe is the combination of spices that comes from where Islam originated from and also from where my ancestors came from, which is India. So my ancestors came from Karinadur, which is a small town in South India, close to Kerala. And there was a lot of coconut there, and what else would you say? Yeah, rice flour and a lot of other ingredients which other Indians in Singapore and also India use. And with the introduction of Islam into India, I think there was a spice trade between them to use things like saffron, raisins, and other kinds of nuts, which I'm not very sure of, like historically and factually when Indians started using. So this was passed on to my grandparents, who then, when they came to Singapore in like the early
1950 to 60.
They, tried to mix in whatever was available in Singapore to then become our food. So, of course, like the inclusion of pandan, lemongrass, what else?
Lemongrass.
And a couple of either ingredients available here, like vermicelli noodles, was stuff that they started incorporating. So I would say Indian Muslim food is just a progression of what was done back in India to what is now available in Singapore and currently being done in our homes. Not just my home. There are so many Indian Muslim people in Singapore, like some on this chat as well, like my cousins and stuff, who have their own versions of it. And something we love to say as a disclaimer, because it's very important, even though we're very proud of what we do, is that there are a lot of amazing Indian Muslim cooks out there, like my aunts, my relatives, my second and third relatives and all that. But it's just that everybody has their own take on it. And my mom learned the recipes from my father's side. So that's what has evolved into what we call Indian Muslim food in our home in Spicy Kitchen.
And also, may I just add on to that? When I say Indian Muslim food, we are Indian. But the fact that certain foods are cooked for certain festivals, so I think that is the reason why it became Indian Muslim food and not just Indian food, maybe. This dish called pal misiam or maybe misiam biryani. This was done during big occasions like iftar or big functions like maybe the second day after the marriage, where the brides come to the home. The guests are invited, they cook this kind of dish. Apart from the rice, instead of rice, they cook bihun with biryani. So these are things that the Muslims cooked. And I think that's why the tag got that Indian Muslim tag to it. And like she was saying, sambar, which is actually because we all eat sambar, but because of the infusion of meat into the dish, it became dalcha. So it became Indian Muslim dish. Yeah. So basically, that's why there's a tag like Indian Muslim and not just an Indian food. These are the things that we eat at home. Maybe because we are Muslim. So I think that's how we sell
that's how we explain our So actually kolkata, right? It's actually something that Hindus use for one of their celebrations. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to say it wrongly, but it's something they give to their deities, which we don't do because we are Muslim. So the kolkata, which my mom makes at home, is a variation of that, not the one that they serve to the deities, and a version that's a bit sweeter and something that we eat either for breakfast or as a snack.
Yeah.
So that is the differentiation, I think, the relevance of the food to our daily lives and the celebrations we celebrate.
Yeah.
But Mama Z and Tahira, so there must have been a sort of spectrum, right, among Indian Muslims. So we do have, like yourself, you're from this southern part of the family, come from the southern part of the subcontinent. What about, the Muslim, let's say if you're from, Bengal or you're from Uttar Pradesh, it would have been it would be a different spread, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it would have been different. Yeah. They would probably be different also. Like my sister-in-law comes from South India, but another part of South India. So she makes a dish called Vattalapam, which is it's a Eid Hari Raya Puasa dish or Eid festival dish, which every family whole makes it on the day of Eid. It's a sweet dish made of egg and cashew and everything. So I think coming to your question, so every part of that continent, Indian subcontinent, will have their own dish, and I think basically.
It informs the dishes according to
where they came from.
Yeah.
We have, I'm looking at the questions from our audience here, and I think we've discussed quite a few of these issues already. But there's one question which might be very topical for our viewers today. The idea of cultural appropriation is talked about a lot today, and one of our viewers asked, at what point do you think making food from other cultures or creating fusion becomes a form of cultural appreciation? And most importantly, how can we respectfully go about recreating heritage foods? Now, first of all, I want to ask you guys, is this even a question for you? All of you seem to are into experimenting and modifying. Is this even a question? Is this something that comes to mind for any of you?
Sorry, I see Sarah stir frying something. Do we need to focus on her recipe?
Okay, let's check out Sarah. Can we share?
So this is, I just put all the ingredients and the fillings, the mushrooms, the dried seafood, and the seasoning is just fish sauce, oyster sauce, and sugar, salt, soy sauce, and sesame oil. And after that is used down a bit, I will add the abacus seeds, and yeah, then it's pretty much done. So most of the hard work is in rolling the balls, the little abacus seeds, and yeah, then I will show you the completed dish.
Thank you.
But actually, on your question, Eileen, I do feel quite strongly about this because I know the cultural appropriation is a very kind of a vigorous discussion, especially in the West, in the States. And as someone who is of half Western heritage, I guess I am quite aware of this, or I am careful about it as well. For me, growing up in Asia, I definitely don't think that cooking food from another culture is wrong. But I think what defines cultural respect versus cultural appropriation is when you actually learn about the culture, the ingredients, the history of that dish or that cuisine, and why certain decisions are made in that dish, why certain ingredients are included, why certain techniques are used. And I think if you approach it respectfully with the desire to learn about all of that and not just a recipe, then I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. But, you know, I saw in the chat someone talking about this. I think if you have local friends or friends from that culture, then talk to them, ask them questions, what is meaningful to them. You know, that is the sort of, I think that's the way that you can prevent it being cultural appropriation.
To add on to that, because I think that this idea of cultural appropriation comes with an underlying idea of power, because somebody may be from a position of power or position of privilege taking on another person's culture without understanding its true intentions or where it's coming from, and then doing it could be possibly disrespectful. But like Sarah said, if you speak to them about it, or you just read up why they've cooked it, where they cooked it from, what ingredients do they use, then it's fine. And I think the most important thing, which I have to say, even if it may be a bit like hurtful to some people, is if you go to your friend who is maybe of a different race and you're like, wow, I want to learn about your culture, it's so interesting. And then the next day you go to like Little India, but you're like, it's so smelly. It's a freaking joke. And that is definitely discrimination, and it's an issue. So like when you are open and accepting to learning about cultures that are different from yours, it shouldn't just be in the kitchen, but it should be extended to everything that the other person does in their life that may be different from yours. And if you can do it in the kitchen, it would be important for you to do it everywhere else as well, I feel.
I'm pumping my fist again. I just want to say that, you know, a lot of the things we're seeing in the media about cultural appropriation actually is mostly from the Western media, as I see it. And, you know, as we know in the West, they are having lots of issues with #MeToo and #white privilege and all these things to do with power structures and inappropriate sharing of power, etc., etc. In Singapore, we are used to living in a multicultural society. We're a port city. We have had many cultures living, working side by side for centuries. So the idea of eating, you know, 4 or 5 or more different cuisines within a single day and going to school with people from different cultures, that is, you know, we are used to that. That's part of everyday life for us. And for me, you know, if you are not from my culture, but you fall in love with my culture enough to want to know all about the food and eat the food and cook the food, to me, that's an honor. You are honoring my culture by showing it interest, you know. And where the ugly word appropriation comes in sometimes is if you cook something and don't reference the heritage that thing comes from, and try to pass it off as something that you have thought up, you know. And a lot of the, you know, some celeb chefs in the West have been accused of doing that. I have not really seen the same thing here, I don't think. Again, as Singaporeans, we are used to growing up side by side with many different cultures. And so there's a natural level of respect, which I think most of us grew up with as well.
I want to piggyback on Christopher's note. Yes, we've always been living in a multi sort of ethnic, multi kind of cultural kind of setting like Singapore. We love enjoying enjoying food from various groups, and we get inspired. We try to create something our own. And those are wonderful. I mean, we all know fusion food. Is as old as history. But I think what's really important is to recognize the source. If let's say food is made of A and B culture, so I think you'll be able to sort of dissect, to unpack and say, okay, this is from A and B, and to give due recognition. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
My concern is, when you take a food, let's say, when you take a food from another culture, and there's no recognition. And there's no mention, of the source. That can be problematic.
Thank you very much for all your thoughts on this thorny issue. I think, just to sum up, and we're going to move into the Spicy's cooking demonstration soon. So I just want to sum up some of the points that have come up, in particular to address the issue that many of our audience are concerned with, which is about, again, how do you understand what makes heritage. And I think, one of the things you guys have talked about is recognizable. I think this is my personal thought, if you eat a dish and you can recognize it as something, even if it may not taste exactly the way that you remember your grandmother cooking it or how you think, but you can recognize it is this. I think that, that could be one criteria. Mama Z has talked about how techniques are really important in kind of making that, in what gives that dish its identity and character. Sarah talked about taste, memory of taste, and how taste is that anchor. And then all of you have also talked about the importance of culture, the whole context around the food. It is not just the ingredient per se or the technique per se. And many of these ingredients are used across different cultures, maybe in different parts of the world. Many cultures have similar techniques, but it's also so it's not just about the actual food itself, but the wider cultural context, the cultural heritage context. And many of you have pointed out that that's how you can be respectful to other cultures as well, in understanding that broader context to the food and what goes around it. And all of you are doing so much good work in that respect, because, Kira spent a long time telling us also about that broader context. So as I said, today's not just it's not a cooking event. We're not here to talk about techniques, but really to bring everyone to be more aware of that cultural heritage context around foods themselves. And that's what gives it that deeper meaning. Okay, so I think time has run out, and I'd like to round up our open discussion for now. So I hope all of you will stick around. I know all the speakers are keen to watch the Spicy demonstration as well, but before we go over to Spicy, I would like to ask Sarah to show us her dish and tell us about it.
Wow, that timing came together miraculously well. I've just finished. So this is my take on Hakka advocacy. It's not exactly authentic. It's using chicken, but to me, this tastes like what I remember from my childhood. And the best part is everyone in my family and my friends can eat it. So I can share this with everyone. And I can even make this vegetarian if I have friends. So to me, this is a recipe that I would love to share with everyone out there. And here it is.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so we'll close the discussion for now, and we will turn the screen over to Spicy Kitchen. Spicy, are you ready?
Okay, so Mummy.
Okay, hi. Hi. The echo sound, just 1 second. Okay. So basically, we're going to do the croquette. Croquette is a dumpling. You need rice flour, you need sugar, and then we will have a bit of cardamom and dry ginger powder. Okay, and then we have to add this boiling hot water
with some pandan.
Yep. pandan is there.
Mama Z, are you looking for a particular texture at this point?
No particular texture, but it's just that the hot water has to cook that flour. So that's why I had to use hot water, and if wait for it to cool a bit.
Because you're going to use your hand, right?
Yeah. Then we add in the sugar.
Tahira, on what occasion would you make and eat this dish?
I've never made it myself. But my mom used to make
So
it.
this is, when I was growing up, my mom used to make this in the Islamic New Year, when we have the New Year for Islamic calendar Muharram. So during the New Year, my mom and like serve this as like a dessert, like a tiffin dish, or maybe like in the evening. So we used to have this with tea or coffee, but we drank tea. And then what we do is that my mom used to make a bit extra, and she used to keep them in the fridge. The next morning she would make semolina kanji or suji kanji. Yeah, and then my mom would break this and put this into the kanji, and we used to eat it together. And it will have a very a different taste, but we don't do it now. But what I'm doing today is the stuffing we make.
So it's called mada
kolkate or folded kolkate or dumpling. So everything is the same. For the kolkate, we have to make this and then make into balls and steam them. But if it's mada kolkate or the folded kolkate, we will have to put in fillings. So okay, we can go over here now.
My mom has already pre-made the filling because we only have 10 minutes today. So yeah, maybe you guys can see it. See it here. So this is how the filling should look like. There's green beans,
Cooked green beans
with shredded coconut
and black sugar, coconut sugar. Coconut sugar.
So what we're going to do now is to make the mold of the kolkate and then stuff it with the filling. And then steam it, right?
Yeah, and then steam it, yeah.
That's it. So we're going to show an example of maybe 4. And then the person who wins it will get maybe more than that.
Here, the filling looks very similar to gendang kasturi.
Yes.
I was about to say that, Christopher, yes.
Yeah, it is. So the fillings, yeah, it is. Rendang kasturi is green beans with coconut, shredded coconut and black sugar, and they fry it, right?
Make into patties. Yeah.
And fry it, right?
Right. It.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I have
rendang.
seen that.
Yeah, rendang kasturi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And sometimes Tahira and Mama Z, what happens if you have excess bubur kacang hijau? What do? You can actually repurpose it. You convert it into a gendang kasturi.
Yeah, you can do that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So clever. So there are different ways in which the kolkate can look. Sometimes like a pillow. Sometimes like a, what do you call it? Like a dome.
Like a ball?
Like a ball with a sharp edge. I'm not sure how to describe it. Or it can be like the one we're going to make today, which is like a flattened version of it and pinched at the side with a fork, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So teardrop shape.
Like curry puff shape.
Curry puff shape. she's going to use the tabletop to make it. This is the final texture of the dough. I'm not touching it because I have a lot.
So yeah, and it will stick onto your hand. Just have to put. Give me some more.
Okay. 1 second.
Yeah. So it will. How do I say the texture is when you poke it? Yeah. Can you see?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So you poke it, do you want it to stay in or do you want it to bounce back?
It will not stick onto your hand so much.
Okay, so it's stickiness. So you don't want it to, when you poke that, so it's dry. It's not sticky. It's not wet to your touch.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Okay.
It looks like a very well-behaved dough.
Okay, I'm going to take this out. Okay, I'm going to roll it.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe somewhere in Little India you could get this. You think?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Somebody could. Yeah, I probably will go after COVID to see if there is somewhere in Little India we can get this. So she's flattening it with a rolling pin. Oops. Okay. How flat do you want the to be?
So the trick is that it can't be too thick. Otherwise, when we eat it, it will be very doughy. So we want the filling to be more. So just a bit here. Okay. Just make this, press this in. And I'm going to use a cup.
Oh.
Yeah. A second. This one.
Oh.
Make so that it's not, it comes off nicely.
It's like a reusable.
Okay.
Good. Recycle, repurpose. Very, very environmentally conscious.
Yes, we do that too. Okay, then we just push this here. And then we
Press it down.
Yep.
So yeah, then we fold it down.
Yep. Let me get some water.
Hold on, please.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's like a little pillowcase, or like it looks like a curry puff. Okay. It looks a bit of a curry puff. Yeah.
So it's okay if the filling is coming out a bit.
No, so we have to cover it up now. Yeah. Can you see?
Yeah, you can. Okay.
Can you see it?
Sorry.
Do I make another one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, can you remove the fire a bit? Steaming. Okay. Yeah.
okay, Mommy, you can make just one more, and then we can go straight to the steaming.
Yeah. Okay.
So that, and then the winner will obviously get more than one or two, but we won't wait on everyone to watch this for now, and we will do it behind the scenes. Christopher asked if it's possible. Chris asked if it's possible to make the other shape.
Oh,
Not
yeah,
the
sure.
pillowcase one.
Oh.
He wants to see the other shape,
Okay.
like the.
Oh yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I can use that dough to make that. So this is how the big ones look like.
Yeah.
What is the texture of the skin like after cooking? Is it springy or is it soft?
Springy.
Ah.
Okay, for the other one, what we have to do is that
What are you gonna use?
yeah, I just use the same flour.
Okay.
We use the same flour,
Yeah.
but we have to add in lentil. We have to add in lentil.
For the other shape.
Yeah, we have to add in lentil because this has filling. That doesn't have filling.
Oh.
So it has lentil.
Uncooked or cooked lentils?
Okay, uncooked. It's roasted lentils. Mung is the green bean lentil. We add a bit of it on it. And then we add in the coconut, shredded coconut.
This is this one, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, true.
So this has shredded coconut inside.
This one has no filling.
This has no filling, so we have to add in a bit more sugar.
I guess we need.
And then,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so this is what we used to eat most of the time because sometimes we don't get green beans. So my mom used to do this like on occasions when she has some extra rice flour. So just make this, and then you just have to do this. So you can see that it has the lentils in it and the shredded coconut and a bit of sugar because it has to be eaten by itself.
But you're gonna steam this, right?
Yeah, we will steam this together also. And then we'll
The
take a
other
bit.
shape, yeah.
So here, you just have to roll this here like this.
It's the easier one.
Yeah, and then do this. Yeah, and then it has to be pressed by the fingers so that it has the finger shape. Yeah, on it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What kind of texture does the lentils have in the dough after it's cooked? Are the lentils soft or are they crunchy or?
Crunchy a bit because it's not cooked. It's just steamed. Yeah.
Not
Sidely.
steamed, roasted, right?
I say like
mean,
once you steam it, yeah. So it has the shape of your fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were young, we used to do like pots and pans. My mom would let us do, and we used to do like what she did, abacus kind of thing.
Oh.
Yeah, used to make something like this, and then there will be a dent inside, and we'll just for fun. My mom used to do this.
Yeah.
Basically, most of it is done in this way, and yeah. So this is steamed. Can we steam?
Yeah, of course. So we're going to go to the steaming part and just put the 3 for now, Mami.
Yeah.
And then of course for the winner we will make more. So we already put the, what do you call this thing?
Steamer.
The same device that is used to make idiyappam. Yep. Okay. 1. Put some oil.
using a pandan leaf or even just a cloth is fine. And then layering on the korukate. How long do you steam it for, Ma?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. I have the cover here. Yeah. Cover? Do we have to flip it at any point? No. Okay. So yes, we are going to have to do a bit more for the winner, but that would be the end of the
session. Sorry.
I mean the end of the
demonstration. So it takes about
10 minutes.
Yeah, 10, less than 10 because it's very little, so it should be fast. Yeah, and then we can just eat it like this with coffee.
Yeah.
And then he was quite spot on when he said that the fillings are kasturi. Yeah, kasturi, I think they use plain flour. Right?
Here?
Yes.
For kasturi, they use plain flour, right? No.
For which one?
For kasturi, do they use plain flour?
Plain flour. Yes, plain flour. That's right.
Yeah. So this is rice flour.
If you want a bit of crunch, you don't do all 100% plain flour. Add some rice flour.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of my favorite dish. Yeah, because of the green beans. Yeah, yeah. But this is purely. It's just like all rice flour, and it gives a different taste altogether.
Thank you for sharing, Mama Z.
Yeah, thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you so much, Mama Z. Thanks, Okay, so I'm sure all of you are waiting to hear who's the person who's going to get to taste that amazing korukate. And winner is Jerry Yee. Our team will be in touch with you to get the korukate delivered straight to you. So congratulations on the winner. Thank you so much to Spicy Kitchen for cooking that dish. And
yeah.
Okay, so I see in the chat there are a lot more interesting questions. So I think this discussion could go on forever. Maybe I could point everyone to where can we take this discussion forward. For Singapore Heritage Society, one of our committee members, Victor Yu, runs a Facebook group called Heritage Singapore Food. So if you're interested in that topic, you can go there and continue your discussions there. But of course, each of our panelists today have their own social media accounts, Instagram, and Sarah also has a YouTube. So please follow them to learn more about what they do and learn from them. Before we round up, I just wanted to point out one of the really interesting threads that's come up in the audience discussion in the chat. We talked just now a lot about how to make recipes, how to adapt them for modern life, how to make things easier. But there's some people who really want to do things the way their grandmothers did before, or how our elders did. And they're having trouble finding the same ingredients or recreating those old techniques. So that's a whole other big question we could talk about. Maybe we can take it over to the Heritage Singapore Facebook group and see what comes up there. But it just leaves me to say, for those of you who are not already our Singapore Heritage Society members, we welcome anyone to join us as a subscribing member to keep up with the work that we do and support our cause. And if you're not already following us on Facebook or Instagram, please do so. We post news every day on Facebook to help you keep up with what's going on in the heritage sphere. And Teeth, can you push up the slide for me, the call to action slide? Okay, so, and also if you'd like to support the work that we do, you can also give a donation to us. We're a registered charity and you can get tax deduction if you're a Singapore taxpayer. So you can either do Pay Now or Giving SG, and the donations that you give help us to continue the good work that we do in speaking out for heritage conservation. So we'll be putting up this slide on our Facebook page, so you can refer to the QR codes and the information for this talk. And of course, this video will be up on our Facebook page as well if you want to listen to it again or watch the spicy cooking demonstration. So please check out our Facebook page to get the video of this event again. Right, yes, and it just leaves me to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much for your time today, the wonderful discussion. I really love the exchange between all of you. You're all at that level of really deep engagement with the whole cultural heritage of the foods that you cook. Thank you so much to Sarah and Mama Z and Tahira for taking us into your kitchens. And that's something we couldn't have done in a normal panel discussion. So this online format worked really well for that. So thank you all so much. And we'll see you all again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Let's do this again for National Day.
Take care, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, all.
Bye, everyone.